If the world could stand against, though I'm my only rival. I chose to force my growth to learn how to be able. Maybe a shaky past, today I'm called stable. I'm standing taller cause I found the right angles. You see my face is bright, I'm shining like a star. With ambitions for moon, I end up on Mars. From the gutter, I ain't supposed to be here. 2.0 came to partner now, and I can see clear, I'm here.
Hey, yo, I'm Neftali, and I am representing Launch Ministry at Celtic 2.0. I forgot my whole line, and I have with me our guest speaker, Janet Silva. Hey,
Hello,
Janet.
everyone.
Janet, it is so awesome to have you here. You are a financial analyst. You have your MBA. Please tell us more about you, but before you do, can you tell us your pronouns so we do not assume?
She and her.
Thank you. We never assume when it comes to pronouns. So Janet, like, you're a financial analyst. What started you on your journey to become a financial analyst?
Sure. So probably watching my dad. So my dad is a chief financial officer. He got his MBA when I was very young, and they were the first people in my family to get their degrees. My family comes from Cape Verde Islands. So my dad came here, had to learn English, went to school, eventually got his MBA. And so he was probably one of the biggest influences for me getting into finance and business.
And where is Cape Verde for those who don't know?
So Cape Verde is a small country of 10 islands off the west coast of Africa, not far from Senegal. I mean, it's still about a 3-hour flight to mainland Africa, but that is where Cape Verde is. Yeah.
Awesome. And just like a few more questions, just to like get to know you better. We still have folks coming on in. What jobs have you done that brought you to this place in life where you do things like this, where this is like a gig for you teaching folks on financial literacy? So like, what has prepared you, like different job roles for this, where you are now?
Absolutely. So, you mentioned my education. I studied international business, and then I got my MBA in strategic management and innovative practices. And then I got like my first like real job at Fidelity Investments. And some of you on the call might have heard of Fidelity. It's one of the largest asset managers in the US. And we also, well, I shouldn't say we, I don't work there anymore, but they do 401k. That's like one of the things they're mainly known for. So I worked there for about 8 years, and then just recently transitioned from a role at EYL University, which I love that. The role I had there, it was facilitating an online educational platform focused on financial literacy. So we talked about everything from real estate to stocks to Turo, Airbnb, things like that. So that's where my expertise comes from. And then also for my personal life, I'm a real estate investor. I also run Airbnbs. I house travel nurses, and an entrepreneur. So.
Earn Your Leisure. Janet was there for quite some time. You can find her on the YouTube pages of their Monday recordings. So she is phenomenal. Earn Your Leisure. They've been interviewed by the Breakfast Club. They're really like well known. So if you don't know, now you know. So more about you, Janet. Janet Janet's very near and dear to my heart because she's been my friend for the last 10 years, and she's one of my close friends, and she even helped me when I was in a bit of financial ruins and helped me clean up my credit score and everything like that. So I guess my question for you, Janet, is just like, out of everything that you could be doing right now, why financial literacy? Like, why teaching folks about finance? What about it like piques your interest so much?
Well, I think it's a justice issue for me, knowing that a lot of our communities don't understand finances, and we've been taken advantage of because of it. So I feel like for me, teaching financial literacy is empowering our people. Also, finances touches everything. Like, we're not going to be talking about relationships here, but one of the biggest reasons that people get divorced is finances and discussing money. So I think if you can get your money right, it's going to teach you discipline. It's going to help you have in some aspects, better relationships, and also make more of an impact I think we want to see in our communities, because living in a capitalist society, money talks. So if you know how to manage money, you're going to be able to have some of those important conversations and make moves in a way that you might not know how to in your personal life and also in a collective. So I feel like financial literacy is freedom, it's empowerment, and it's one of my favorite things to discuss because it's not as hard as we think it is. And sometimes we feel a lot of shame if we've made, bad decisions, we have debt or X, Y, and Z. And a lot of people have made similar mistakes because it's just a lack of knowledge. And once you know these things and you practice them, next thing you know, you could be teaching someone else in your community. So that's my goal, is to hopefully teach you guys something that you could teach someone else. So.
Period. So you say terms like capital and assets. What are different forms? And I know we're going to have a Q&A, but I just want to, like, with different jargon that comes up that may be not familiar to a lot of us, what is, like, can you define capital? Can you define asset? And what does that mean for us on a day-to-day? Like, what is our capital? What is our asset?
Sure. So capital is another way to say money. So it could be the capital you need to start a business or things like that. So just interchange that with money. And I'll try to keep that in mind during the presentation, so I'm not throwing too much jargon out there. But an asset is something that you own that helps you make money. And we're definitely going to be talking about that tonight, because assets are a great way to build financial wealth and generational wealth. So like passing down a house, for instance, that has a lot of equity in it. And when I mean equity, it's been paid down. Some of that debt from the mortgage has been paid down. So there's a lot of equity in the house. And that's really powerful when we're talking about, passing things down to children and things like that, because they don't have to start from zero like some of us did, So assets are amazing because you want to put your money in assets so that your money continues to grow, and you want your money to work for you. We work hard for our money. We want to keep our money. We want it to be expanding and hopefully getting us to this point where we can talk about generational wealth and things like that. So that's why assets are so important for us. And again, I'll be touching on it and going a little deeper in the presentation.
Thank you so much, Janet. I know you're about to get started with your presentation. And as promised in the previous recordings, the last two have been very casual and very chill podcast recording style and conversational. Janet is a teacher, so she has slides for y'all, and she's really going to have the time without my interruption to teach us and really break it down, the things that we need to know. If you are listening to me live right now and you are currently under the Zoom and under the sound of my voice, please ask questions. Please take advantage of Janet and ask all the questions that you have. There's a feature in the Zoom chat where you can privately message me. If you don't want to ask a question in front of everybody, that is fine. Privately message me. Let me know what question you have. So when we get to the Q&A, we are able to ask Janet all these amazing questions. And there's no such thing as a dumb question. I just asked about capital and assets. So that just helps to show, whatever question you may have, whatever thing you're not familiar with, it's not a dumb question. It's okay if you don't know. If you don't know, you don't know. The next thing I just want to share, if anybody is coming in or has anything to say, please engage Janet via chat. I know that'll definitely help out teaching wise. So be like, oh, that makes sense. Yes, so that shows us that you are engaging with us. Okay, so Janet, without further ado, please show us your slide, and the floor is all yours.
Thank you. I am just gonna oops, I wanted to make sure I have the chat open. Where is that? Give me one moment. I just want to make sure the chat box is somewhere. Okay, there we are. Can you guys see my screen? Just put a yes in chat if you can see it. Anybody? There we go. Thank you guys. All right, let's get started. So tonight we'll be discussing how to manage your money. And like Neff mentioned, my name is Janet Silva. I have my MBA. I've worked in several different organizations and companies that manage money, and I'm going to teach you guys some of my tips today. So a couple of things we're going to cover is budgeting, creating a savings account, using an emergency fund, avoiding bad debt, how to manage credit cards, and then investing to build future wealth. So let's start off with budgeting. Put the word budget in the chat if you're listening and you're engaged, so I can see, get some fire and let me feel your energy. So what is a budget? So a budget is a financial plan. It is an estimation of money made versus money spent over a specified future period of time. A budget can also aid in setting goals, measuring outcomes, and planning for emergencies. So I have, you'll see most of my slides have pictures and kind of illustrations, because that's really what I want to use the slides for. So if you look here, I have a sample monthly budget. On the left-hand side, we have income, and some of the income comes in as take-home pay, probably from a 9 to 5, W-2 kind of work and situation. And then we have freelance income, probably a side hustle. Maybe they take photos or something like that. So that $500 is coming in from there. Investment income, that could be stock, for instance, a stock, and we'll talk about stocks as well. If you guys don't know too much about it, I'm not sure, but that could be a stock appreciating in value. For instance, if Apple came out with a new phone and that got people excited, the stock goes up, and then maybe there was an income here of $100. And then Aunt Sally. So maybe your aunt gives you $10, it's your birthday, you know what I mean? So that's income that came in for the month. On the right-hand side, we have the expenses. We're gonna start off with the needs. So rent, car, utilities, internet, phone, gas, things like that, student loans, groceries. I don't know if I mentioned that already, personal care. Then we have your wants underneath that. Eating out, maybe going to the movies, buying new clothes, cable, TV. And then the last category we have here is savings. And this right here, this monthly budget is set up in the 50, 30, 20 rule. And we'll discuss that in a second, but just put 50, 30, 20 in the chat if you are following along. So 50% of your budget should go to your needs. And what do we mean by that? So that should go to, let's say, obviously you need a place to live. You might need, obviously, you need transportation to get to work. You need to have your lights on at your house. So utilities, things like that. So 50% of the money that comes in should be going to your needs. Then you have 30% that would go towards your wants. That could be things that you could eliminate if you need to, right? So going out to eat with that friend or that Starbucks coffee, things like that. And then 20% should be your savings. And what I like to do is automate my savings. So I would have like a percentage of the take-home pay here, that $3,200. 20% of that maybe would go into automatically into my savings account, and I just kind of put it into I set that up through direct deposit. And so that's how I would kind of set that up for the monthly budget. And then I have here as a tip, track what you have spent for the month. You can use an app like Mint or personal, what's it called? There's another one that I like. Let's see if I have it on my phone here. I'll pull that up later, but then it starts with personal. And so I really like that one too. So there are other, you can Google and find some apps and things that will help you manage your money in more of a digital automatic way and show you what you're spending in different categories. Next slide here, going further into budgeting. I know that some of you, or I was told that some of you guys might be in your teenage years and things like that. So I figured how to budget for your first apartment would be really important to discuss. And so one of the rules of thumb is really not spending more than 30% of your income on rent. Young adults, yes. So that's a rule that I think is super important, because if you are looking at apartments and you're thinking, well, I make enough money to cover this, but it's more than 30% of your budget, then it can start getting really tight, and you never know, different expenses, things come up, and then next thing you know, you're behind on your rent. So having those type of numbers and percentages in mind will help you when thinking about what to, like what apartments you should be looking at. Some ways to help keep your rent down is like obviously getting roommates, maybe sharing that cost, canceling subscriptions to certain things so that you are only using 30% of your budget. So let's say you're over budget because you have like Netflix and Hulu and all these other things going on. But if you cancel some of those, that would help you get back to that 30%. So, managing other expenses will help you make sure that your bigger items like your rent and utility bills and things like that are easier to pay at the end of the month. You might want to, this says use a bike for errands. That might be unrealistic depending on where you live, but just making sure that you're paring down on, transportation or like carpooling with friends when needed can help save money there. And then of course, cooking your own meals. That's something that I struggle with. I wish I did more of, because obviously you can control the salt intake, the sugar intake. It's healthier, but also can be really budget friendly. And then in terms of how to budget for your first apartment, obviously rent is a fixed amount every month until you renew your lease. Sometimes you might have people that want to, sorry, I'm just looking at the chat. You might have, when you renew your lease, you might have your landlord that want to increase the rent or something like that. But on average, it is monthly fixed rate. You might need renter's insurance depending on where you want to live. Utility deposits. We don't have those in Rhode Island, but you might have them where you live. And that can normally range from $70 to $150. Gas is normally covered by your landlord. And obviously that's how you would cook and things like that using a stove. Security deposits, refundable 1 month's rent. Depending on the state, it can be different. But in Rhode Island, where I am from, a security deposit matches a 1 month's rent. And that's a way to, obviously, if something breaks in the apartment, things like that, the landlord has that money to take from at the end of your lease to fix things if needed. Electric, fairly small amount each month. That's going to be your lights and things like that. Water, inexpensive and often paid by the landlord. In Rhode Island, most landlords pay the water. And then administrative fees and things like that might also come along with your first apartment. And just to unpack the 30% rule, for instance, like if we go back to the previous slide here, the rent is $1,000 in this example. And if you see like take home pay outside of the extras that might fluctuate from month to month, we're seeing here that this is about 1/3 of the take home pay. And so that is helpful with the 30% rule to kind of give you a visual of how much that might be. And okay, next slide here is budgeting mistakes to avoid. Now that we discussed budgeting, here's some of the things to keep in mind. So obviously keep the essentials within the budget. So really track your expenses, especially if you're not sure where your money's going at the end of the month. Sometimes taking like writing down what you're using, or obviously using one of those apps that I mentioned earlier, can help you keep those things in track. Live within your means. If you know you only make $3,200 a month, maybe not have, spending more than that on clothes or anything like that, because it doesn't make sense. So yeah, live within your means as much as possible. Continue to learn. I really love this one because sometimes we don't put ourselves on our own budgets. And so, investing in yourself is important. So maybe taking that class or, paying for something that's going to help you build your skills is also super important. So that, something to keep in mind. Make all your payments on time. That's super important, especially when we're talking about credit and debt. When you start falling behind on payments, that goes to your credit score, and that can drop your credit score significantly. So just doing something simple, if you don't have the best credit, just paying things on time, even if it's small amounts, can really help build your credit. Next thing here is take the time to find free offers. Of course, coupons, different discount codes and things like that you can use are important and can be helpful to save that extra bit of money at the end of the month and can add up at the end of the year. And obviously searching your options. Sometimes we'll take the first option that we see, and that might not always be the best option for you. So asking questions, learning, and making sure you're getting the best offer or deal on your car or whatever it is that you're looking at will be helpful for you. And then in the chat, I see, what do you recommend for someone who can't have a bank account because I'm flagged? If you can't have a bank account, I would definitely figure out ways that I would try to go to a credit union and see what you could do to find a place that you can put your money. I wonder if it's just a specific bank that's flagged you. I'm not sure all the details on that, but credit unions are normally very user friendly, and you can talk to them about your goals, and that way you can find a place to house your money that way. I wouldn't recommend having like wads of money anywhere. If you can't put it in a bank account, I definitely would want to try to put them in assets. Yeah, credit unions are amazing, and some sort of asset. So I would say maybe opening up a brokerage account with Fidelity or TD Ameritrade or something like that, and getting some low cost index funds so that your money is somewhere, because you don't want your money just sitting around. It's not really safe. And also, there's something called inflation. I don't know if you guys know what inflation is. Put a yes in chat if you've heard of inflation. It's a word we've heard a lot in the news lately. I bounced checks and didn't pay 2 banks back. Okay. So I would actually work on paying the banks back. So the money that you have coming in, I would pay the banks back and then clear those, and then you would be able to kind of clear your name and then go from there. All right. What's inflation? So inflation is basically where your dollar is worth less and less as time goes on. And just a good example for you guys would be like, do any of you guys remember going to the corner store and buy candy when you were a kid? Just put a yes in chat if that was you, if you're not the only one. I remember when I was young, I used to get a bag of chips for like 25 cents. Now, if you go to the store, you might see the same bag of chips as $1. And it's like, that's inflation. That's a good example of inflation. Costs are going up, things are more expensive. And then as time goes on, simple things like a cup of coffee, it goes up. And so we want our money to beat inflation. And what I mean by that is, let's say I make $5 today. If I don't save that $5 in a high yielding savings account, and what I mean by that is a savings account that pays me interest on my money that will beat inflation. If I don't do that, then I'm gonna lose money. And put a yes in chat if you understand that, or put a maybe if you want me to go a little deeper on that. But just to clarify a little further, that same bag of chips is gonna cost you more money today than it did 5 years ago, right? But that 25 cents that you got that few years ago, what if you weren't able to invest that 25 cents? And that 25 cent grew to 50 cents, and then it grew to $1. So now today, you can still buy the same bag of chips because your money was also growing with inflation. So what if you didn't invest that 25 cents and now that 25 cents is worth less because you can't buy the same things in the market with that 25 cents? Does that make sense to you guys? So that's why we want to put our money in a place our money's going to grow, or at least beat or match inflation. Because if not, you're losing money every day, which sounds crazy, right? And right now, inflation is higher than ever. Part of that is because the government is trying to increased interest rates because they're trying to manage inflation that's going on right now. And so there's a lot of things going on in the economy and the market that is causing these issues that we're seeing here. We also are having a lot of supply chain issues going on that are causing the inflation that we see. So just really keep that in mind and think about how you're spending your money, living within your means, maybe cooking those meals and things like that, because you want your money to work for you. You want to save as much as your money as possible and have it grow. And we're going to talk more about that in this presentation. Moving on to the next slide, we're going to talk about opening a savings account. So if you see here in this picture, you see the credit union there, which I kind of mentioned already. Credit unions are a great place and also a safe place to put your money. For instance, one of my friends likes to use a credit union, and she'll go there and put her money in there and won't take any of the money out unless she won't use like those ATM cards. So it's even harder for her to get to her savings. And a lot of times credit unions are not like the big banks like Citizens Bank or Chase. You guys might know Bank of America, things like that. And those are normally everywhere, super easy to get to, apps and things like that on your phone. But sometimes credit unions can be a little bit slower when it comes to technology and things like that. Not like anything crazy, but it's like that extra step really helps because you don't want to have a savings account that's too easy to get to, because it just makes you really think about why you're going there, why you're grabbing that money, and you want to have really good reasons to touch your savings account, right? So, so starting off here, compare banks. So you might look at credit unions, you might look at Chase, you might look at the bigger banks, and really figuring out what are the fees associated with the different accounts, and then making the best choice for you. You're going to gather your documentation. They might need an ID from you, your social security number, things like that, an address. So that proves that you where you live and things like that. Just kind of documentation that will support that you are who you say you are. And then you can go in person. Some of them will let you actually sign up online, but you can do that online or in person, depending on the bank. And then from there, you're going to set up, your direct deposit, or you might go into your bank with actual cash to put into the account and things like that. So how do you make the best choice when it comes to banking is a question I see in the chat. Like I said, comparing the banks, and just really for me, it's all about fees. I don't want to put my money in a bank that's going to charge me a lot of fees. So, obviously a bank that's not going to have like an annual fee and things like that, so you can keep as much of your money as possible, is important. I like banks that have good customer service, like we talked about. Credit unions really are helpful with helping you reach your goals. And then shopping around, like really doing your research, talking to different friends. You might be the type that wants a bank that's super convenient. So maybe a Chase or something like that you have everywhere, so that makes you feel safer. So everyone's different. Again, so, think about your goals, and then, compare and contrast from there. Next here, we have assets versus liabilities. Neff touched on that earlier and in the introduction. And so I have a kind of graph here to show you some examples of assets and liabilities. We have a house here, insurance, so like maybe life insurance. Intellectual property, that is, it's a digital asset that can be used to make money. So let's say you created some sort of online system that people pay you for a monthly fee for, something like that. It's a way to make money, and information that's digital and intellectual property. Businesses are assets, right? Because they help you make money. You're able to, sell a product and things like that, to generate wealth. Cash is also an asset, stocks and bonds. And then we have on the other side here, liabilities. We have credit cards. Definitely credit cards with high interest rates can be a really bad, tough liability, because you're getting charged for that money that you borrowed. And if you don't pay it off fast enough, that balance continues to grow. We have cars here. It's interesting. Some of these things could be considered assets depending on how you use them. For instance, if you buy a car, you put it on Turo, or you have a car and you use it for Uber or Uber Eats or something like that, you could be turning your car into an asset because you're making money off the car. But in general terms, and I'll break down what Turo is in a second. Thank you so much for asking that question in chat. But generally, people buy cars and they just drive them, and they're not really using them as a way to make money outside of driving to their job. And it becomes a depreciating asset or a liability per se, because that you're not really making money off of your car. And I did mention Turo, just to backtrack on that. Turo is a way, it's kind of like Airbnb for your car. And you can go to Turo.com and you can see how you're able to rent other people's cars that they put on that website or put on that platform. And I actually used Turo years ago. I put my car on it because I was working from home pretty often. And so I was like, why not just put my car on Turo? And I made a little bit of money doing that. Some people I haven't heard this used often, but this is something I did hear before. Let's say you work in a big city and parking is really expensive. You could put your car on, I don't think it was Turo. There was another service that's very similar to Turo, but you can put it on these kind of like car sharing websites and make money on your car instead of having it sit in a parking lot, and then you're making that car an asset. So there's a lot of different ways you can use some of these things. So I don't want you to think just because like a house, for instance, is on the asset side, that it's technically always an asset, because houses in some senses can be liabilities. If you buy it at the top of the market, or you buy a house bigger than you can, manage, financially or something like that. So then it in a sense, it actually is a liability because you're losing money. But the reason why most people put houses on the asset side is because as you pay down your mortgage, you build equity, and eventually you can pass that house down, or you can sell it and make money off of it. So in general terms, these are houses are normally assets. So when I say top of the market, I'm mentioning how even a year ago, housing prices were like skyrocketing. Right now, they're starting to go down a little bit. So I would say if you bought your house earlier last year, you bought at the top of the market. And as housing prices are going down, you might see that you lost value in your house because the market is going down, even though you just got a mortgage on this house for, let's say, $500,000, and you have to pay off that loan to the bank. But a year later, your house is now worth $490, for instance, right? So you lost $10,000 in equity in that house. So that's what we would call an upside down mortgage. I don't want to get too detailed and, give you guys a bunch of crazy information that maybe is too much to absorb at the moment, but just in general terms. But I'm saying any of these things can technically be considered a liability or an asset based on how you use them. For instance, student loans is considered here a liability, but some people, depending on what you majored, and how much your student loan was, it could be considered good debt. Still a liability, but not necessarily something negative, where liabilities sometimes have a negative connotation. So it all depends on how you use things. And the general rule of thumb is assets are things we own and liabilities are things we owe. So if you owe money, it's probably some sort of liability. Next here is an emergency fund. I love emergency funds because what would good debt mean for student loans? I see that in the chat. So, okay, thank you. That's such a great question. Good debt is something that, so for instance, if you get student loans, you probably got some sort of a degree or a certificate or something like that that's going to help you get money down the line through a job, through a skill, through a business that you were able to build from gaining that knowledge. So some people consider that good debt because it's a means to an end that's going to help you pay it back and things like that. Normally, student loans are low interest rates. Bad debt normally is credit cards. They're high interest rates. So let's say you get a card from, I don't know, Macy's or something like that. A lot of times they'll give you a card and you can buy, clothes or whatever on it. But then if you don't pay that balance off at the end of the month, you might be paying 20% on that money. So let's say I give you $100. And this is the bad debt scenario, $100. And if you don't pay, you use that to buy a bunch of stuff, right? Like buy a new pair of jeans, maybe, or something like that. And then at the end of the month, you don't pay it off. Now you owe me $120 because I have a 20% interest rate on that. Because you can see how that can add up really badly. And that's considered bad debt because it's for items that you are not necessarily wants, right? So you don't want to spend money on things that are going to depreciate. So that pair of jeans is not going to still be worth $100 after I buy it and I wear it. Maybe I can thrift it somewhere, but no one's going to pay the same $100 again. So you're losing money and you're buying something that's depreciating or losing its value over time. So that would be considered bad debt. Let me know if that makes sense to you. Oh, yep. Thank you. Awesome. I'm happy that made sense to you. All right. So emergency funds. The purpose of an emergency fund is to improve financial security by creating a safety net that can be used to meet unexpected expenses, such as an illness or major home repairs. Stash of just in case money is really what emergency fund is. What do you call it? Why helps if you lose your job, end up in ER, need emergency repairs on your car, something like that. So for me, my emergency fund is, probably a couple $1,000s just to cover it, like something that goes wrong in my car, different things like that. I also have an emergency fund for my house. Worst case scenario, you never know what's going to happen. But that money is not to be touched unless it's an emergency. It's definitely different from a savings account, because savings, you may have a goal in mind, but emergency fund is like kind of money for God knows what can happen, which things happen, right? So definitely keep that in mind, because a lot of times people blow their budgets because they don't plan for emergencies. And so you have your budget all beautiful and you got everything figured out, but then your car breaks down, you know? And so you really want to have that emergency fund because it helps you really stick to your other financial goals. And it gives you peace of mind, you know that if anything goes crazy, you have that cushion there for you. So you're not as stressed if like you do lose your job because you're like, okay, well, I have my emergency fund. Some people's rule of thumb is having 3 to 6 months saved up. So you would save, like, write down all of your expenses, primarily your needs. Of course, you want to cover some of those wants as well. And then you want to have your emergency fund be 3 months of that, right? So you lose your job, but you have 3 months to figure it out, and maybe you can Turo or maybe you can drive Uber in the midst of that. So you don't feel as stressed because you have options. Drop a yes in chat if you feel what I'm saying. If you have an emergency fund, put emergency in the chat. And if you don't, put a no in the chat. Next, we're going to be talking about avoiding bad debt. So we kind of already touched on that through a question I got in the chat. I love that we have emergency. Demita, good for you having that in the chat. I love that. So first, we're going to talk about what is debt. A lot of us already know what that is, but just in case, I'm going to discuss that. Debt is the amount you owe when using credit to buy goods and services. Anytime you receive credit, you are borrowing funds and going into debt. So debt equals principal plus interest. So in my example with the pair of jeans, that was $100. The principal would be for that actual pair of jeans. The interest would be that 20% that we discussed in that example of interest that was charged because I borrowed that money, right? So debt equals a principal plus interest. Principal is the amount originally borrowed. Interest is the amount of money the borrower must pay for the use of someone else's money. You want to avoid bad debt is borrowing money to pay for something that is not an asset and will not make you money down the road. Again, we already discussed this, but here is a visual for you guys some of you that might be visual learners. So you see the lender here could be, Visa or MasterCard or that Macy's card that you got, right? And normally it's in association with MasterCard or something like that. So they loan you the money you owe, and then you're going to pay it back with interest if you don't pay it back during a certain time. For instance, like a lot of these revolving credit or those cards for, from the Macy's or Best Buy or Target and things like that, if you pay them back before the end of the month, they don't charge you interest. But that's kind of how that works. Can you break down a cycle for podcast listeners? So yes, so the lender here, like I mentioned, is Macy's and things like that. So they give you a card, for instance, and then that money will go to you, the borrower. And then from there, you'll pay it back with interest depending on how long it takes you to pay it back. So that's the first cycle in the diagram that we're looking at. Next, we're going over to why. So for instance, you might need that money to pay for college or for some startup capital for your business that you want to start, or to buy an investment like your house, right? So the lender in this case could also be a bank. So these are some reasons why you might use debt. Types of debt, like we mentioned here, or I've touched on a little bit, could be credit cards, mortgages, student loans, auto loans, small business loans. So all of those are different types of reasons why you might get into debt. And then here it describes good debt versus bad debt. So good debt is anything that's going to help you grow. Bad debt was in this illustration shows like almost like a ball and chain on somebody because it slows you down and it ends up being a liability for you that isn't growing your money or, helping you learn something that can eventually help you build wealth. So, again, debt is not necessarily a bad thing. We have people that have made a lot of money, built huge businesses because they were able to get good, cheap debt and help them build these ideas that they have. And if it's some type of business that you want to start, that's gonna, is gonna make you've done your research, your market research, and you're gonna make money back on it, then why not take out some good debt to help you build a business? And that's one of the things that actually is really great about the United States. And other countries, it's hard to get debt. It's hard to get financing for your businesses or different things like that. So, and that's why people are not as easily building businesses in other countries, maybe third world countries. I know that term is not necessarily the best term to use at this point in time, but you get my drift. Certain countries don't have the ability to get financing. And so you're not able to really work on your money, your dreams and goals without having, people to give you that money or taking a lot of time to save the money. So that's one of the cool things that we have in this country is having access to debt. Next, I'm going to talk about investing to build wealth. Ultimately, for me, that's the goal. The goal is to build generational wealth and to hopefully have, future generations have it easier than we did. And so on this slide here, I'm going to talk about stocks and real estate, which end up being some of the two biggest ways people talk about building wealth, but it doesn't have to be just these two ways. You could build a business, or you could, invest in your 401k and make sure you have, you're increasing the percentage and things like that. And so, yeah, and then after this slide, we'll check in with you guys, see if you have any questions, you want me to, re-explain something before I keep moving on. So, all right, so stocks, put a yes in chat if you know what a stock is. Okay, Danny says he does. Neftali, Stormy, and Adam, excellent. All right, so just for a recap for everyone, a stock is ownership. It's an ownership stake in a company. So companies that are public will allow people to buy shares in their company, and they use that money to, maybe expand a product line or things like that. So that's a lot of times what companies do. That is a way to get money to continue to grow, and they're giving you a piece of ownership in order to get the capital they need or money to grow their business. So that's a cool thing about investing in stocks is like, if you buy stock in Apple, you can say you actually are a shareholder or you're owner in a company that maybe you like or you really enjoy their product. So it's also a mental thing. Ownership is so powerful and important. And actually these companies allow you to vote on different things depending on what it is, because you are owner. So your opinion now matters and how they're going to move forward. So yeah, you can buy stocks, but another reason why we buy stock is not just to have ownership in some of our favorite companies, but it's to build wealth. So as the price of the stock goes up, you get gains from it. So for instance, let's say Apple, for instance, we buy their stock for $100, and it goes up 10%, you made $10 in each one of those shares. And imagine if you hold that stock for 20 years, 30 years, as a company continues to grow, you continue to make money on that investment, which is really great. Some stocks actually pay dividends. So what are dividends? Put a yes in chat if you know what a dividend is. All right, we got one yes. So a dividend is, so let's say Apple, actually, I'm going to use them again. They do pay dividends. And what dividends are is at the end of a quarter, sometimes depending on the company, they pay dividends on different time periods. But let's say, for instance, at the end of the quarter, they look at how much money they've made, and then they will disperse a bit of the money they made to their shareholders. So let's say they made a bunch of money this specific quarter. So everybody gets a little bit of that in form of a dividend. When you get a dividend, you can actually roll that in and you can buy more shares with it, or you can take that money out. It depends on you how you want to handle your dividends. But that's, again, another way to make money on your assets. In this particular case, in this example, we're talking about stocks, right? So how stocks are valued, you can, some things to consider is cash flow. So let's say the company's making money, they have a good cash flow coming in, their products are selling, the stock might go up because there's a lot of positive energy and they're making money. People are excited about that. So the stock goes up. Stocks are also, what do you call it? What's the word I'm trying to use? Basically, they are affected by the news, right? So let's say some negative news comes out about a CEO or something like that. You might see the stock dip because the public is saying, they're not happy or they feel some type of way about their leadership or things like that. Also, future profits. So let's say a company like Tesla maybe has another really cool product they're coming out with, you know, people might value that stock higher weighted as opposed to another company because they see the potential and they see it as a growth stock. So these are all different things that you can think about investing in when you're trying to build your wealth long term. Another thing here is real estate. Real estate appreciates over time. So let's say you bought a house for $200,000 10 years ago. Right now it might be double that amount. And so you have that equity because the house is appreciated in value. So that's really great. And then real estate can also give you a cash flow. So let's say you own a multi-unit and you rent out the units to tenants. So the tenants are paying you money every month. So you're getting that cash flow. And also you have the benefit of the real estate appreciating over time. So those are two different ways you're making money off of that real estate. Then in this example, we have a receptionist here. So let's say you have a fancy building and, you know, you offer different things to your tenants. You can make money that way. And then you have ancillary real estate investment income. So let's say you have washer and dryers that you charge people to use. That's another way you can make money using your real estate. You could also rent out spaces for, you know, parties or for conferences and things like that. And, you know, so there's a lot of different ways you can make money with real estate. Let me check the chat here. How can you buy stock? All right, so you can buy a stock you can use Cash App. Cash App allows you to do that. You can open up a brokerage account, which I think is sometimes the best thing to do. You could use a company like TD Ameritrade. It's very similar to open up a bank account, right? So you'll need, you know, different documentation and things like that. And then you might tie it into a bank account or move some money over into your brokerage account. And then from there, you can literally just say, I want to buy 2 shares of Apple, and I'll show you how much Apple is going out for that particular day and how much money you're going to need to buy those 2 shares. And then you buy them. And next thing you know, you see that in like kind of outlined in your account. And then I'll show you how it fluctuates throughout the days or weeks or years and things like that. There also, you can, you know, Fidelity is another really good one. There's Webull. There's a lot of different ways and you can buy stocks. So a popular one that people talk about is Robinhood because it's user friendly, but also there are fees and different things that goes on with Robinhood. So I normally say don't go with Robinhood, but if you're just getting started, it's better to be investing than not. So find what feels the most comfortable for you, and then you can buy stocks using whatever, you know, that platform. Let's see what else we got in the chat. Okay, so I'm going to take a second here and you guys let me know if you have any questions or anything that I've discussed so far that you want me to go over again. Are we good?
Yeah, you are doing a phenomenal job and you have covered so much ground that it has been really great. Oh. I just want to take a moment and just take a quick pause for our current live listeners right now that have been waiting for their secret phrase. And Janet's going to explain why this secret phrase is so great. So it's going to be assets over liabilities. Assets over liabilities. And Janet, can you explain why assets over liabilities, what's the meaning of this phrase?
Sure. So assets over liabilities it's a lifestyle. It's a way of life, because you want to be like we talked about money, you want your money to make money for you. So you want to put your money into assets, because when you put your money into assets, your money continues to grow. And then you have a way to build generational wealth. We don't want to, at least for me, I don't want to work a 9-to-5 forever, right? You want to make sure that you're setting yourself up for the life you want to live. So put a yes in chat if you want to have financial freedom and freedom of your time to do whatever you want to do with your time. Put a yes in chat if that's you. Right, that's most of us here. We want to have financial freedom. So as you're making money and you're putting that into assets, you're then going to be able to live the life of your dreams by having that residual income. Liabilities obviously take away from you. There are ways that, you know, you're putting your money into that car that we mentioned that is depreciating as soon as you drive it off the lot, right? So buying a fancy car and spending, $50,000 on a car that as soon as you drive off the lot is now worth $40,000, you just lost $10,000 right there. And then you think about the maintenance on the car and everything else that goes along with it. You're losing money. And then we talk about inflation on top of that. So there's so many things going on that are eating away at your money. So that's so important for you to put your money into assets over liabilities so that you're holding onto your money and you're building that financial freedom that eventually all of us want.
Thank you, Janet, for explaining our secret phrase. And I also want to take a moment. Janet's about to resume and continue, and we're going to have our Q&A. So obviously, if you're looking at the time, we're going a little bit over, which is fine. You already have your secret phrase, and I feel like you're learning all so much. I just want to quickly say, if you find yourself like that you're like currently in a fixed income, you have support from the grant, you don't have a lot of money access, it all starts with a penny, with a dollar, with a few bucks. You can go and buy stocks with 10 bucks, put it in, go on your Cash App, you can buy the stock that way. It starts with you looking into a first home buyers program. If you want to own a home one day and you have like possibly like a cash only job that you're making money through cash and it's not going through the state or whatever, start saving that money in and see how much money you need to buy your first home. If you want to be a business owner and you have a car and you have a lot of downtime and you're not using that car, go on Turo app, make your money that way. If you know that you want to be a business owner and you want to do like ancillary like investment, get a what's it called, Janet? A vending machine. Go buy a vending machine in a public spot and stock it up. Like there's different ways for you to make money that doesn't just rely on your 9 to 5. You can be creative in it. And I know a lot of folks may be in a particular situation where I can't make a certain reach. Work with it, get creative in making more money, and don't think that this is going to be your end all. I remember talking to someone in the group, and I remember saying for a moment of just like, okay, you're renting in this season, but the next season, you're going to be a landlord. You're going to be owning. That this is going to be it. So I know that this may be intimidating talking about stock, talking about all these different terminologies. I want you to see yourself in the future and seeing yourself outside of doing what you're doing now, what your day-to-day looks like. It's going to be different for you and you're going to be able to make it happen. So really take this wealth of knowledge. Janet, you are dropping bars after bars after bars. I can't wait for Q&A. It's going to be amazing. And this recording is definitely going to be available for everybody. So please, Janet, continue on. And please continue sending in your questions throughout the slides. And we're also going to have a time afterwards. Thank you.
Excellent. So I'm just going to wrap it up so we can get to Q&A. I don't want to go too much over time. But again, just to highlight and summarize what we just said, why you should be investing, obviously, because we want to beat inflation. And when we invest, interest can also compound. So we continue to grow our money. We want to prep for ourselves for retirement and make sure that when we get of a certain age that we actually can take a break. And then ultimately we want financial freedom, which is something we discussed. Different ways to make money. We talked about having a salary. You can work for, hourly work, business income, like we talked about briefly throughout the presentation, gig income, that's like your Turos, your Uber, things like that. Commission income, maybe you sell houses, maybe you're a realtor, something like that. And of course, different side hustles. Passive income, we touched on too, which was the dividends. So let's say you own a stock, you don't have to do anything to get those dividend payments besides just holding it. So that's passive. Real estate, depending on how you see it, can be passive. If we're just like, for instance, talking about the equity that you build over time, that's definitely a passive way to make income. Crowdfunding is a way to make money to get seed money to build your business. Interest income, let's say the stock again, it's building, we call it interest over time or even in your savings account. Royalties from different intellectual property or things that you own. And then peer lending is also another way to make passive income. Crowdfunding, like I said, is a way, like let's say you you are reaching out, I'm just responding to a comment in the chat. That's a way to raise money for different business ideas. So you can have people actually give you money to help you build your business. And then royalties, for instance, if you help write a song, right? Let's say for some reason you're on one of Rihanna's songs, let's dreaming here. As she sells a song, you get a percentage of that through royalties. So that's just an example of a royalty. And peer lending. So you can have a friend borrow money from you, and then they pay you the interest that way. So helpful tips, again, tracking and spending your spending. You can use the Mint app or other helpful budgeting apps. Live below your means. So really have that budget going and know how much you can spend every month and stick to that. Don't be a good consumer, be a good investor. So always find a way to get your money into some sort of asset so that you can build the wealth that we talked about. And then believe in yourself and work on reaching your goals. I know for some people, you've made a lot of, financial mistakes and things like that. And it feels like, when am I going to be financially free or financially stable? Just keep working at it. And eventually you're going to get there. For me, I know when I was paying off my student loans, I felt like that would never happen. I remember getting side jobs and, I had a roommate at the time and all these different things to try to keep my expenses low. And eventually I got there. It took me years, but, I ended up reaching that goal eventually. So believe in yourself. Write your goals down, create a plan, you can definitely get there. So now I'm going to open it up for just question and answer. If you have any questions on any of the slides or something outside of the slides that pertains to, money management, I'm happy to help if I can.
Let's talk about the 50, 30, 20. Can you remind us that, because I want to definitely ask questions that are going to be, that we're going to want to remember and be a key takeaway. So can you refresh us what's the 50, 30, 20 rule?
Absolutely. So 50% of the money or your income every month should be going to your needs. So that's housing, that's your utility bill, that's your car expenses, internet, phone, things like that. 50% of your money. 30% goes to your wants. So that's eating out, entertainment, buying new clothes, that Hulu subscription, that Netflix, things like that. So that's the money that you can kind of eliminate if needed. And then 20% is going to go to your savings. The best thing to do is automate these numbers. So obviously, if you can put your rent on automatic payment, your car, utilities, certain things like that, so you're not missing a payment, that's going to be good. Obviously, automating your savings is great because you can set it and forget it and not have to worry about, did I save this month or whatever. And then your wants, maybe those are things that you, budget, but you can maybe not automate. So you're not you have a little bit of leeway there. Yes, feel free to screenshot this if you would like. So 50, 30, 20 rule is really important and very helpful. As just kind of gauging how much you should be spending. And I think be very careful with, housing can be a huge expense, transportation. Another thing I found out while I was researching, preparing for this was that a lot of young people spend most of their money on food. So you want to really be careful with some of those items that can creep up on you. You're going out with your friends every day or that lunch break, and you're not really thinking about how much money you're spending. And it really starts to add up. So, cooking at home is also kind of annoying at times, but can be helpful to really stick to the budget. This says, what if your needs take more than 75 to 80% because of medical reasons and past due bills? What should I try and do? So depending on where you are, this might be different for you. So I would write down all of the debts, all of the expenses you have and tackle those first. And if you can live live back at home with mom and dad or rent a room somewhere so that those expenses, your needs are even lower, that might be helpful. Just for a time being, for instance, when I was trying to pay off debt, I had to, I lived with a roommate, different things like that. I don't mind living with roommates, but also I didn't feel like at that point in time, living on my own was the best option if I wanted to reach these financial goals that I had. So, and also 50 to 80% is based on how much you're making now. If you're able to, start Ubering on the side or creating graphics for somebody, helping people manage their social media or, find a side hustle or a side job, that's you're going to make more money. And then those medical expenses or those past due bills are going to end up being less and less of a percentage, because obviously you're making more money. So that's another way to think about it too, is how can I make more money? Maybe you have some skills, you can tutor somebody or something like that, so that you can get that money down, pay down those bills.
And I saw a question or a comment regarding like, okay, I don't know how to cook. Listen, YouTube is your friend. I learned how to mince an onion by watching YouTube videos. And it's like you learned like, hey, onion is a crucial piece. And you start grocery shopping like, hey, rice, that's what, well, depending what type of rice you're making, that is water, salt, and oil. That is easy ingredients to make. Meats, I can go to like the meat market and buy cheap meat and like season it right and cook it. So there is way that you can learn how to cook without like, you know, making this complicated recipe. So you can save money and cutting costs by not going out to eat, and just say like, hey, I'm gonna save going out to eat maybe once in the middle of the weekday and once in the weekend, but I'm gonna cook my meals.
Right.
And also the power of a sandwich can go a very long way. So I'm just saying, hey, if you are really adamant about your budget and about like saving money, do whatever you gotta do. Like, you know what I'm saying? I definitely want to touch on what stocks do you currently recommend investing in? I know that's another line of work. I know people get paid a lot of money to like when it comes to stocks. So what do you recommend as far as stocks of where to invest in?
So, you know, I'm not a financial advisor, so these are just things to think about. I would say, you know, investing in an S&P 500 index fund is probably one of the safest investings you can do. And if you don't know what that is, S&P 500 is an index that holds the top 500 companies in the US. And normally when people refer to the market, they're referring to the S&P 500. And so what's really great about it is, like I said, it's the top 500 companies. And for instance, if a company's not doing so well, they literally will swap it out of the S&P 500. So it's always going to be the top 500 companies. And what you can do is set it and forget it. You can invest maybe $20 a month or whatever it is, anything you have into the S&P 500. And over time, the market, you know, always goes up over time. So if you start buying this like small shares of index funds, you can do it through Vanguard is a really good one. It's a brokerage that you can set up an account with, and they have really low fees. So that's a good way to invest and have, you know, you have your money work for you and not be paying a bunch of fees and things like that. You can always get a financial advisor and go a lot deeper. You could, you know, Apple's a great company. Microsoft is a great company. But obviously when you buy specific shares of just one company, it's a lot riskier because God forbid, Apple iPhones just start blowing up randomly. Like, we hope that doesn't happen, but then your stock could really tank. But when you have something like an index fund with 500 companies in there, if one's doing bad, you know, the others kind of help help balance it out, you know? So it's definitely one of the safest things you can do. And one of the things I like to do is investing in index funds. It's simple. You can, what is it called again? When you, I forget the term, but basically it's investing the same amount of money at a specific period of time. So every month at $20 or every week, $5 or whatever. And so over time it ends up, now it's going to bother me. I need to know the term that I can't remember it right now, but it's a great way to just set it and forget it. And then, you know, 10 years from now, you're like, wow, I've been able to buy all of these shares and they're up X amount of money, you know? And so that's really an easy way to get started.
So stocks is not meant for us impatient folks that just like we see the money, we see it when they're up a couple of bucks, and then we want to pull it out as if it's a savings account. What do you recommend?
You got to be careful with that too. If you buy stocks, and let's say, for instance, Tesla is a very volatile stock that can go up and down really quickly. But let's say you pull out the money less than a year and a day, you're going to pay higher taxes on it. So you got to be careful with stocks and really want to be, I mean, if you made money, that's fine. You might not care that you paid more taxes, but long-term capital gains, are taxed less. So if you hold it for more than a year and a day, the tax is a lot less for you. So there's different things you want to keep in mind when you're, you know, investing in stocks, but overall, it's a great way to to buy and hold, and then, build generational long-term wealth.
Ooh, that was really good.
Oh, I remember the term. It's called dollar cost averaging. Sorry, it just came into my mind. But like basically when you invest the same amount, at a specific period of time, it's called dollar cost averaging. And the reason why it's called that is because you're going to end up buying the stock at highs when the market's high, and then also at lows. But it eventually averages out somewhere in the middle because you're consistently buying those shares. So dollar cost averaging and index funds is probably the safest, best way to invest, if you ask me, but I'm not your financial advisor. Do your own research, of course.
So a lot of different key takeaways that we had. We can budget through the Mint application. We can buy stocks on Cash App. We can use different forms of assets like renting our car through Toro. What other key takeaways is there for those that have been taking notes? And we learned about the 50-30-20 rule. What other key takeaways do you have for us if we're forgetting something that we should walk away from this and know?
I know that one of the things that you talked about in the beginning was credit. And so I'll just give a couple more tips on that. Credit utilization is super important. So let's say you have 5 credit cards and each one of them is like $200, right? So that's $1,000 that you have in credit available to you. You don't want to spend more than 30% of that, which would be $300. And the reason for that is that's a weighted, that's one of the ways that they look to create your credit score. So if you're using a lot of the credit you have available for you, it's looked at negatively. It's almost like, you're spending a lot of money that you maybe don't have, kind of thing. It's the best way I can describe it. So it's good to have high credit card limits, but you don't want to use all of it. The lower amount that you use, the better. So I would get credit cards. I'm not telling you to get credit cards, but if you do have them, try to use as low as possible. And then don't close the longest credit cards you have. So the first credit card you open up, you want to keep as long as possible because they look at history of credit as well. So if your first credit card, you close it, that might not be good for you because now your credit history looks like way less years in time. And that's another thing that they use to help your credit score. So I would say, like, if you like, gas is a good thing that you could put on a card, and you pay it off right away. You want to be using it, but not too much, you know what I mean? So that it doesn't mess up your credit.
That was perfect. I know a lot of people have been asking for a finance course. You just got a question on what credit card companies do you recommend?
So, I mean, I'm still kind of new to the whole credit thing to a certain extent. Like, I have a Visa, I have a MasterCard, but for me, like, my biggest thing is, like, I have a Fidelity card that gives me cash back. And I really love that because, especially if I'm buying like a airplane ticket or something like that, I like to put them on that card. And then I have an account there that I see, like the other day I looked and I had $1,000 in there. So that's really cool. I would say, if you have a problem with credit cards, be very careful. But if you're somebody that does have self-discipline, whatever big purchases you're going to make, I would definitely make it on a credit card that's going to give you points or something back, because it's like you're making your money again work for you in a different way, and you're building your credit. So almost everything that I buy, I use a credit card for, and I just pay it off so that I can get my points and things like that. So you can get gas cards for gas stations you go to on a regular basis. Your bank account, like most banks have cards that you can use as well. So then, like, for instance, I use Citizens Bank. You probably might not know what it is because that's a bank that's kind of more popular in New England. But let's say Chase, for instance, they definitely have a Chase card that you could use and get points and things like that. So when you log in, you see your checking account, maybe your savings account, and then you also see how much you have on that card, and you can easily pay it off just by clicking pay, and it'll take the money out of your credit, your checking account. So I would look around at the places that you go to often, see if they have a card that's available and maybe apply that way. But again, if you have issues with sticking to your budget, I would definitely say try just getting your budget down first, so that you don't get yourself into sticky situations, because credit cards can be a slippery slope. And then that bad debt that we talked about can start to, rack up, and you don't want to do that.
This was amazing, Janet. I feel like we need like a finance 2.0 class, because it's just like there's so much more information and so much more ground that we can cover here. And I definitely think a lot of folks would love to hear on how to clean up their credit, use their credit, and different things like that. So thank you so much for engaging with us. If we can just give the clapping emoji to Janet for giving us like such a you done blessed this girl, so we appreciate you. Thank you for engaging with us. Thank you, clapping emoji. I appreciate that. And well, everybody, I'm at a loss of words, but till next time, I hope you guys took something from this. This was amazing. The podcast will be made available to you. And for those that were listening live, you will be getting the survey soon. So Janet, thank you again. I hope you have a wonderful evening.
You too. Thanks for having me.
Till next time.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.